In Fayetteville, North Carolina, a routine traffic stop was about to become anything but routine. Officer Troy Fenwick pulled over a black BMW with tinted windows and out-of-state plates. At first glance, it seemed like a minor violation, failure to signal. But Troy's gut told him there was more to it. Inside the car sat a black man, late 40s.com, sharply dressed, hands steady on the wheel. His voice carried no fear, no anger, just control. "Afternoon, officer. Is there a reason for the stop?" Troy asked for his license and registration. The man complied with precision, no sudden moves, no hesitation. His name, Deshaun Tramble. But something about his calmness irritated Troy. He pressed harder, asking questions that had nothing to do with the stop, where he was going, what business he had, why he was on base. Tramble answered only what was necessary, nothing more, nothing less. .com, steady. When Troy demanded he step out of the vehicle, Tramble moved slowly and pulled out a badge. FBI, Special Agent Deshaun Tramble. For most officers, that would have ended the stop. But not Troy. He dismissed the badge as if it meant nothing. He smirked, stood taller, and doubled down. But Agent Tramble didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply said, "I'll be making a phone call now." And with one call, without names, without drama, he set in motion events that would shake the entire town. Troy paced beside his cruiser, unsettled by how unshakable this man was. No fear, no anger, just calm authority. When Troy pressed again, Tramble's words cut deep. "I've served this country for 23 years. I've stood across from men who were real threats. I've protected lives you'll never even know about. And now, you are playing a very dangerous game with the wrong person." That moment defined everything. One man standing firm in dignity, refusing to be intimidated. Another, blinded by arrogance, trying to wield power he didn't truly have. This was no ordinary traffic stop. It was a clash between authority and true legacy. Asterisk, this wasn't just some random route. It was in my GPS. But Troy, he didn't want to believe it. Or maybe he just didn't want to. "Working a case?" he asked. Tramble didn't answer. He just stared, silent. Unshaken, "You always act like this when someone pulls you over." Troy pushed. "No," Tramble said, his voice cutting sharp like glass. "Only when I'm treated like I don't belong somewhere." "I absolutely do." That hit different. For a split second, it cracked Troy's mask, the tough front he was hiding behind. But pride is a heavy thing. It doesn't let go. "Easy, I'll tell you what's about to happen." Troy puffed his chest out. "I'm calling this in, and we'll see if your little agency stands behind you." Tramble didn't flinch. "They already have." That's when Troy heard its tires crunching against the road. He turned. A black Suburban rolled up behind his cruiser. Unmarked plates. Dark tinted windows. And then, another one. Tramble didn't move. One hand on the wheel, the other resting calmly on his thigh. Troy's fingers twitched toward his radio. But something in him froze. Two men stepped out of the Suburban. Suits, earpieces, moving with that quiet confidence you can't fake. No weapons drawn, just precision, authority, control. One of them looked at Troy, then at the BMW. "You Fenwick?" he asked calmly. "Yeah, who are you?" Troy shot back. "Stand by." They didn't even glance at Tramble. They didn't need to. They already knew. Everyone did. And in that moment, Troy felt small, like a kid who had opened the wrong door. His hand hovered near the radio, but he didn't dare touch it. These men weren't playing. Their presence spoke louder than words, silent, professional, undeniably in charge. And what Troy didn't know, the real gut punch was still coming. And it would land in less than 4 minutes. Asterisk, they didn't shout. They didn't wave badges like TV cops. They didn't need to. Authority was written in their posture, how they stood. How they didn't so much as blink when Officer Troy Fenwick tried to take control of a situation that had already slipped from his hands. Troy cleared his throat, stepping forward, louder this time. "Who are you with?" The first man, late 40s, lean frame, dark suit, didn't even look at him. His eyes flicked toward the BMW. "You pulled him over." Troy shifted his weight. "Yeah, improper lane change. Uh-huh. Not a question, just a tone. The kind that said, 'We've heard this before.'" The second man stepped up, calm, steady. "Has Agent Trumbull been placed under arrest?" "No, I was just conducting. Is he suspected of a crime?" Troy hesitated. "Not exactly." The man didn't argue. He didn't need to. He simply stared, then pulled out a small phone, turned slightly away, and made a quiet call. Trumbull still hadn't moved, still sitting in the driver's seat, hands steady, one on the wheel, the other resting on his thigh. His phone sat face down on the console. His eyes followed every step outside, reading the room with the kind of calm you only get from experience. He'd seen this before. Different cities, different languages. The same pattern: arrogance turns into confusion. And confusion turns into fear. Troy tried to push back, desperate to regain footing. Look, this guy was being evasive. Wouldn't say what he was doing here, 'cause he doesn't have to. The first man said, flat and final, "He's federal." You initiated a stop, demanded his destination, told him to exit after he showed ID. That correct? He had a badge, but that doesn't mean I can't ask questions. Sure, but the second you saw federal credentials, that should have been it. You escalated without cause. I didn't escalate anything. He made a phone call. He brought this on himself. The agent's brow lifted. He brought it on himself by alerting his chain of command that he was being detained without justification. Troy's mouth opened, but nothing came out. And then another car pulled up, a dark gray government sedan. Plates official. A woman stepped out, navy blazer, crisp white blouse, low heels. She walked with purpose, ID already in hand. Special Agent Quinn Broccoli, U.S. Attorney's Office. Her voice was steady, commanding. She didn't slow as she approached. "Officer Fenwick, correct?" Troy swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." "Explain." "The stop?" He changed lanes without signaling. "That's all." She gave a curt nod, then turned to Trumbull, who finally stepped out. Tall, composed, his presence unshaken. He straightened his cuffs as he walked toward her. "Agent Trumbull," she greeted, extending a hand. "You all right?" "No damage." "Just the usual." Her smile was small but sympathetic. Then she turned back to Troy. "You're aware? This man holds TSSI clearance." Troy blinked. "TS what?" "Top secret, sensitive, compartmented information. He's the lead investigator on 2 active foreign counterintelligence operations. Briefed this morning by the DA and the National Security Council." Her tone sharpened. "This stop should have lasted 90 seconds. We're now at minute 26. Troy's chest tightened. His heart dropped. This was no longer embarrassment. This was shame. "Your body cam is active?" Broccoli asked. "Yes." "Good. Keep it running. You'll stand right there while we conduct a full internal review. Supervisors have already been contacted. You will be escorted back to the station for immediate debrief. Pending results, you may be placed on administrative leave." Troy muttered, "I was just doing my job." "No." Trumbull finally spoke, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "You were doing what you think your job is, but you let BIA's guide instinct instead of reason." Troy's face burned red. but he didn't speak. Not now. Not with this many eyes on him. Just then, another patrol unit arrived, likely called by dispatch in case things escalated. A uniformed sergeant stepped out, looked at the agents, then at Trumbull, and instantly understood who had made the mess. Officer Fenwick. The sergeant called softly. Troy didn't resist when the sergeant said, "Why don't you come over here with me?" He walked stiffly, each step heavier than the last. Trumbull didn't look smug. He didn't even look relieved. His face carried no victory, only a cold, measured disappointment. The kind of look a teacher gives when a student fumbles an easy answer. Special Agent Broccoli glanced at Trumbull. "You want to file?" she asked. Trumbull shook his head. "No, not worth it. The camera will tell the story." But the camera wasn't the only witness. What it had captured would ripple louder than any traffic ticket ever could. Troy sat on the edge of a concrete barrier, just a few feet from his cruiser. His foot bounced uncontrollably, sweat soaking his back despite the late afternoon heat. He couldn't stop replaying it, all Trumbull's calm. The sudden arrival of the Suburbans. The U.S. Attorney's office walking straight past him as if he didn't exist. It felt unreal. But every humiliating second had been recorded. Sergeant Leo Bransfield stood nearby, arms folded, silent. He didn't look angry. He looked tired, like a father watching his grown son stumble into a mistake too big to undo. Inside one of the SUVs, an agent spoke quietly on the phone. Windows rolled tight. Another stepped aside with Broccoli, their heads close together, murmuring as they coordinated the inevitable report. Trumbull stayed by his car, composed as ever. He hadn't even loosened his tie. His stillness carried more weight than shouting ever could. Troy had expected yelling, threats, maybe a power struggle. Instead, Trumbull had made one quiet phone call, and the fallout was still falling. "You ever seen anything like this?" Troy finally asked Bransfield. The sergeant didn't answer right away. He sighed, slow and heavy. "Yeah, once. Different city. Different cop. Didn't end well then, either." Troy rubbed his face. "I didn't know who he was. He wasn't in a suit, just looked normal." Bransfield turned his head, finally meeting his eyes. "And what exactly did you expect him to look like?" The question hit like a punch. Troy said nothing. Down the road, Trumbull glanced at his phone. No urgency, no tension, just checking the time. He could have left already. He wasn't under arrest, hadn't been charged. But he stayed in one SUV. The agent on the phone leaned forward. "Yes, sir. Credentials confirmed, TS clearance. Correct? No resistance, no aggression. Body cam intact. Understood. We'll hold until further notice." He hung up and stepped back out. "DC's been notified," he told Broccoli, "and not just them. Someone at Defense Legal Affairs called Internal Affairs directly." Broccoli arched an eyebrow. Didn't waste time. "Nope," she turned toward Trumbull and gave a small nod of respect. "You know how fast the chain reacts when someone at his level rings the bell." The agent muttered. He barely said 10 words. Didn't even drop a name, because he doesn't need to. Broccoli replied. Troy overheard none of it, but he felt every second tighten around him. Every muffled conversation he couldn't hear only deepened the dread. He hated it, the loss of control, the sinking sense of being pulled under with weights strapped to his legs. Finally, Broccoli walked toward him. Her face wasn't angry, not even stern. It was something worse, just firm. "You'll be contacted within 48 hours, Broccoli said evenly. "Internal Affairs will schedule a review. You're expected to cooperate fully. Until then, you're not to engage with press releases, statements, or discuss the nature of today's stop with anyone outside your command chain. Do you understand?" Yes. Ma'am, you'll return to the station with Sergeant Bransfield. Leave your cruiser there. Administrative leave begins immediately. Yes, ma'am. She didn't wait for follow-ups. She simply turned and walked back toward the Suburbans. Troy stood up slowly, unsure if he should feel relieved or crushed. His eyes drifted toward Trumbull, who had just slipped his phone into his pocket and turned for his car. "Hey, Troy," called out, not even sure why he was speaking. "You could have told me right off the bat who you were." You knew how this looked. Trumbull didn't break stride. He paused only as he reached for the door, then finally spoke. "You already decided. What you saw. Before you asked a single question." And with that, he got in, started the engine, and pulled onto the road. No sirens, no high-speed exit. Just a smooth, deliberate turn back into the world. But the storm wasn't over. It was only beginning, and soon. The entire country would see what really happened by the time Agent Trumbull's BMW disappeared down Briarwood Lane. Officer Troy Fenwick was already sitting in the back seat of Sergeant Bransfield's patrol car, not cuffed, not restrained, but weighed down by the gravity of his own choices. Bransfield said little on the ride back. The only sounds were the steady hum of the engine and the occasional burst of static from the radio. Troy kept his gaze out the window, but his mind replayed the calm face of a man who didn't need to raise his voice to command a room at the station. Troy surrendered his cruiser keys and began an incident report. Bransfield stood watch near the door, arms crossed, light a sentry, waiting to escort him out. By then, the video was already moving. First, a routine upload to a secure federal server. Standard procedure. But within hours, a snippet leaked. Not from Trumbull, not from the agents, not even from the U.S. Attorney's Office. It came from inside the department, from someone who had seen enough. From someone who knew silence wasn't going to fix this. The footage was raw, wide angle slightly, distorted, but clear. It showed Officer Fenwick towering over a comm. Seated Agent Trumbull questioning his presence, downplaying the credentials he'd been shown in full view. And then, the moment. The one that caught everyone's attention. Troy smirked and said, "That's supposed to mean something?" Trumbull, unshaken, answered, "I think it will." That quiet line spread like wildfire, not just on Black Twitter, not just among watchdog groups or local activists. It resonated with veterans, former federal agents, military families, middle-aged professionals across the country. They all saw something familiar in Trumbull's restraint by morning. The headlines were everywhere. Fayetteville officer stops black FBI agent, escalates despite ID. News anchors quoted the body cam transcript. Podcasts dissected every second. One former federal prosecutor called it a textbook example of institutional ego. The clash between ego and discipline was now unfolding in full view of the Fayetteville Police Department. Phones rang without pause. Reporters staked out the precinct. The mayor's office drowned in emails demanding answers. But while the world buzzed with outrage, Agent Trumbull sat quietly in a modest hotel room just off I-95. A cup of black coffee in hand, eyes heavy with fatigue. His phone lit up with non-stop messages, colleagues, superiors, even old contacts from abroad. He answered none of them. This wasn't victory. It wasn't vindication. It was exhaustion, and the sobering knowledge that things could have ended far worse. Across town, Officer Troy Fenwick sat slumped in his apartment, watching the story spiral out of control. His name trended. His face was plastered across headlines. Old classmates, strangers, even family members were tagging him in posts with one word stamped over his reputation. Embarrassing. The suspension wasn't what crushed him. Truth that, for the rest of his life, one reckless moment of arrogance would define him. On cable news, panelists dissected the footage. Retired U.S. Marshal Quentin Maris delivered the line that cut deepest. People think the badge gives you power, but it doesn't. The badge is just a symbol. Real authority comes from how you carry yourself when nobody's watching. That agent showed more restraint in 30 minutes than most men show in a lifetime. Back at the station, Troy's fellow officers shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided his eyes. Others muttered half-hearted excuses. "You didn't mean it, man." Or, "It's just bad optics." But it wasn't about optics. The problem wasn't perception, was the reality etched into video. And the truth never blinks. The bigger shift, however, wasn't happening in newsrooms or on Twitter. It was happening in homes around kitchen tables, in break rooms, and across living rooms. Regular people were asking a question too uncomfortable to ignore. If this is what happens when cameras are rolling, what happens when they aren't? By Friday morning, Special Liaison Quinn Broccoli had already been on for calls. 3 Zoom briefings, and 1 long, silent drive to the Federal Building in Raleigh. All centered on one thing: that traffic stopped. As soon as she stepped into the DOJ's Eastern District office, her inbox lit up. Journalists, civil rights groups, internal affairs. Even contacts at Homeland Security, all sending the same short subject line. Saw the footage. Quinn had been in this business long enough not to flinch at headlines. But this case was different. It wasn't just about misconduct. It was about clarity, timing, and the kind of restraint that pierced through every layer of government. She shut her office door, exhaled, and pulled up the raw body cam footage. Not the clips the internet had cut down. Not the viral sound bites. The full 32 minutes. No edits. No commentary. No. As she watched, it became clearer with every passing second. Agent Trumbull never raised his voice, never stepped out of line. He didn't need to. He gave Troy Fenwick space to do the right thing. When that failed, he made a single phone call. A call that would change everything. Quinn now understood exactly how the situation had escalated to her desk. The call Agent Trumbull made had gone straight to a national FBI liaison, a classified task force contact. From there, it took only minutes to reach her office. That's why she had been the one arriving on scene Thursday, stepping out of a government sedan already briefed on who Trumbull was and the level of work he was involved in, and she hadn't come alone. What the public hadn't yet seen were the follow-up meetings, the classified memos, and the quiet warnings that circulated to departments across the country: revisit protocol when interacting with federal land personnel in the field. Because here's what people didn't realize: Trumbull wasn't just coming back from some base assignment. He had walked straight out of a closed-door briefing on a known foreign infiltration effort. He had spent months overseeing asset monitoring across 3 states. His clearance level, higher than 90% of the agents in the entire region. And yet, Officer Troy Fenwick had treated him like a random civilian trespassing on county property. Quinn flipped open a folder stamped, "Internal, not for distribution." Inside were notes from Langley. The message was blunt. If Trumbull had felt even slightly threatened and triggered a federal security alert, the DOJ would have been forced to shut down ongoing operations in 2 counties. This wasn't just about attitude or bad optics. It was about national security. A chain reaction set off by a single bad stop could have disrupted months of classified work and created a mess far larger than any viral video. Meanwhile, back in Fayetteville, a mandatory department-wide training was announced. The official reason was advanced escalation and identification procedures. But everyone knew the truth. It was about one thing, and one thing only: what had happened on that roadside stop at a corner diner. 2 off-duty officers sat over bitter coffee, watching the clip again on a phone. I mean, he didn't even yell. one said quietly. The other shook his head. He didn't have to. That was the scariest part. You could feel the shift. And back in the DOJ, that shift was only beginning. Quinn sat across from Agent Trumbull in a small conference room. He was back in his work attire, charcoal blazer, gray button-up, and a sleek watch that probably cost more than her car. He didn't look worn down. If anything, he looked ready. To keep moving forward, we're holding the line on our end, Quinn said. I just need your statement for the record. You're not obligated to speak to the media and no one above you expects you to. Good, Trumbull replied flatly. I don't plan to. You sure? Quinn pressed. The narrative's already out there. Trumbull leaned back slightly. The people who need to know already know. The rest, they'll do what they always do. Talk, forget, move on. You don't want to put your voice into it, Quinn asked. His face stayed calm. My voice was already there, in the silence. And silence carries further than shouting. When the right people are listening, and this time they were listening. By Saturday afternoon, the footage had taken on a life of its own. People slowed it down, added captions, zoomed in on faces, matched it to dispatch logs of Van layered. Expert commentary over the video. It wasn't just a news story anymore. It had become part of the national conversation. Clips ran on cable. Podcasts dissected it line by line. On social media, one post exploded nearly 1 million likes in 24 hours. It showed a still frame of Officer Fenwick's face the moment Trumbull told him. You already decided what you saw before you asked a single question. The caption read, and that's the whole story. The Fayetteville Police Department scrambled to control the fallout. A carefully lawyered statement went out. The Fayetteville Police Department acknowledges public concern regarding a traffic stop involving a federal employee. We are conducting a full internal review. Officer Troy Fenwick has been placed on paid administrative leave pending investigation. We will not comment further at this time. It was reviewed by 3 attorneys, rewritten 4 times, but none of it mattered. The internet had already made up its mind. Troy Fenwick wants just another patrol officer in a mid-sized town had become a symbol of overreach, a symbol of bias, a reminder of what happens when authority isn't matched with judgment. And through it all, Trumbull said nothing. No interviews, no press conferences, no tweets, just silence. And somehow, that silence spoke louder than all the outrage combined. Asterisk. But it wasn't just the footage that carried weight, it was the posture. The control. The refusal to be baited. Inside the FBI's Charlotte field office, Trumbull sat in his usual spot at the far end of the 4th floor conference table. His colleagues didn't hover, didn't press him. They knew him. They knew how he handled. Pressure. One junior analyst, Tarek Joshi, passed him near the break room. He kept his voice low. Hell of a thing, sir. Trumbull gave a small nod. Not dismissive, just enough to acknowledge the words without inviting more. Later that afternoon, a supervisor stopped by with a manila envelope in hand. Media requests. A few big names. Even Anderson Cooper's team asked for an off-record chat. Trumbull didn't even open it. He shook his head, not interested. You sure? Could flip this whole thing into a bigger conversation. It already is, Trumbull replied evenly. They don't need my face to tell it. Meanwhile, across town, Troy Fenwick sat alone in his darkened apartment. The blinds were shut. His phone powered off. A half-finished sandwich sat untouched on the counter. But his name was still alive online, still trending though. News scandals were beginning to push him down the feed. He had been called everything under the sun. Some defended him. Many more tore him apart. Yet what cut deepest wasn't the insults, the threats, or the memes. It was a single line from a former Academy classmate who posted, "This didn't have to happen. You could have just respected the man." That one stayed with him, 'cause deep down, Troy knew the truth. Something had shifted in those first 30 seconds of the stop. It felt the instinct to de-escalate. He ignored it. He chose ego over professionalism, and now the entire country had watched that choice in real time. Back at the precinct, the chief sat down with the city's legal advisor. Asterisk behind closed doors, the city's leadership met not, because they expected charges. There had been no fight, no drawn weapons. The damage was already done. Trust was bleeding out across the community, and the chief knew he'd be answering questions for months. Still, no lawsuit came, no press tour, no attempt by Trumbull to cash in on the moment. That was what disturbed Troy Fenwick most. He had braced himself for fire and fury for boycotts, marches, angry chants demanding justice. But what he got instead was worse. Silence. A silence carried with quiet dignity. A silence that doesn't just threaten a man's career, it makes him question his entire sense of self. That night, a news anchor put words to what the footage had already shown. What we saw on that roadside wasn't just a bad stop, it was a mirror. And some people don't like what they see staring back. And the thing about mirrors, they don't go away. Some people turned away from that reflection, but others stared into it and started asking harder questions. Questions that linger long after the cameras stop rolling. By Monday morning, Officer Troy Fenwick's badge sat locked in a drawer at the precinct, his access key deactivated, his cruiser reassigned, his name scrubbed from the weekly shift calendar. The internal affairs review had only just begun. But everyone already knew how this story ended. That morning, Troy walked through the station's front doors in plain clothes. No uniform, no authority, no shield. An HR liaison escorted him to a side office where a stack of administrative leave paperwork waited. He didn't argue. He didn't even try.